Okay, I think we might kick off. So yes, welcome. This is like a normal Zoom meeting rather than a webinar. So you will be able to participate when we get towards the end of the presentations, if you'd like to, and we'll be able to have some question and answer session at the end of what we're doing. But yeah, I'll welcome you all to this submission writing workshop, where we'll be sort of running through how you can make a submission to the New South Wales Upper House inquiry into the impact of the live sheep export ban on New South Wales. So yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, Jed. So before we kick off, I'll just acknowledge that I am speaking to you from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, and I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of all the lands that we're meeting on today, and acknowledge their enduring connections to land, sea, and community, pay respect to their elders past and present, and acknowledge anyone from those First Nations who are here in the meeting today. So what are we here to do today? You can go to the next one, Jed. Just a quick outline of the workshop. Brief introduction. So my name's Britta Jones. I'm one of the co-founders of the Australian Alliance for Animals. I think most of you have been to one of these before or know Jed and myself well. So Jed and I are both co-founders of the organisation. We run these workshops to help encourage people to be able to make submissions to political and policy processes that exist around Australia. This one's obviously New South Wales based. We've done a few others over the past couple of years, but they're all about helping citizens engage in animal advocacy and providing opportunities for you to have your voice in these important inquiries and submission writing processes. So I'll talk through in a moment the actual submission writing process that we have, that we're covering today. Jed will then give you a brief explainer of the key points that you can make in your submission. We'll talk you through how to use the submission co-pilot. I think quite a few of you have already used it, so you'll be familiar with that. And then we'll talk about how you can lodge your submission. And then we'll probably have a little bit of time for a Q&A. So we're hoping that by the end of the workshop, you'll understand the key points to include in your submission for this process. You'll know how to craft the response using the AI submission co-pilot tool. And obviously the main outcome that we want to have at the end of this workshop is that you will already have lodged your submission. This isn't a very complex submission process, so I think that's entirely possible that by 7 o'clock you may have been able to do that, or at least to have a clear plan of action to lodge your submission by the 20th of September. So that's the deadline for this process. So let me just tell you a little bit about the consultation process that's occurring at the moment. So this is a New South Wales Legislative Council inquiry. That's an upper house inquiry in New South Wales. I think Jed will probably talk a little bit more about the reasons for this inquiry existing, but the inquiry is about the impact of the phase out of the Australian live sheep export by sea, on New South Wales. You may be asking the question already, what impact will there be on a phase out that is largely about a trade that occurs out of Western Australia on New South Wales? That's something that Jed will talk about a bit more, but in short, we don't think there is any significant impact at all. But fortunately, the inquiry itself also includes terms of reference around animal welfare, and we think it's really important to be able to show the New South Wales Parliament, New South Wales government, that the level of support for the phase out from particularly New South Wales residents, but the consultation process is open to people from anywhere around the country too. So yeah, the inquiry's terms of reference, they cover economic, social and animal welfare considerations. The kind of focus of them is around economic and social considerations in terms of the detail, but animal welfare is a key aspect of this as well. So that's really the area that we're focusing on. And yet submissions from residents in New South Wales will carry more weight. As I said, you can make submissions if you're outside of New South Wales as well. I think I've already mentioned the due date, 20th of September, something to just have in the back of your minds. So yeah, just a little bit of background to why this inquiry has occurred at all. So federal government, I think probably most people here will know, committed to ending live sheep exports in this term of government. That legislation was passed in July with a phase-out date of May 2028. However, we're really well aware that the live export industry is seeking every single political opportunity to oppose the phase-out. This inquiry is one of the opportunities that they see to oppose it, to put a case against it in a completely different jurisdiction to the one that it is mainly affecting. But we think it's also an opportunity to just to reiterate the level of support for the phase out. And that's really what we're hoping to do with generating submissions to the inquiry. So I'll just hand over to Jed now to talk about the key submission points and tell you a little bit more about why this inquiry is happening. Thanks, Jed.
Yeah, great, thanks, Peter, and hello everybody. Great to see you all here. Yeah, as Peter mentioned, it's interesting to look at the context of this inquiry and the way it interrelates with the federal phase out that's going on at the moment, because of course live animal exports is a matter that's regulated by the federal government. So why is the New South Wales Parliament sort of looking into this? And it is very much an inquiry initiated by the Nationals and the Shooters and Fishers in New South Wales, for those political reasons of attempting to put a little bit more pressure on the federal government around trying to highlight and fearmonger around potential impacts on East Coast industries. But it's fairly clear to see that yeah, the impacts will be negligible if none at all in New South Wales. So we're just going to take you through a few of the key points that we'll be making in our submission, but we've also fed these points into the AI submissions app that we'll discuss a little bit later in the session. So as Peter mentioned, animal welfare, of course, is our main priority to highlight. But there's really three categories for the submission points, one being animal welfare, the other being community views around the trade. And as Peter mentioned, great opportunity for making it really clear to New South Wales politicians that New South Wales residents do not like live sheep exports either, and would like to see it phased out. And finally, of course, the economic impacts as well. So we've structured our submission around those three categories. So many of you will be familiar with the animal welfare issues within the live export trade. So I won't go into too much detail on this. I think it's important, though, to be conscious of what the industry groups will be attempting to convey to New South Wales politicians. And we've heard this ad nauseum within the federal debate, that the trade has been fixed after the 2018 Awasi Express incident, the regulatory reforms that were brought in. Everything is all hunky-dory now. The sheep have a fantastic time on these vessels, and they get to the other end in a better state than when they got on the boat. Of course, that's very, very far from the truth. And we're going to demonstrate that the regulatory reforms that did take place really were just tinkering around the edges. So just moving the deck chairs on the Titanic because the trade remains fundamentally incompatible with acceptable standards of animal welfare. And the data show this. Over 60% of voyages that have had independent observers on board have identified heat stress and prolonged heat stress within the sheep as they are transported over the equatorial region into the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, those hot climates. So heat stress is still very much a factor on board the vessels, and they're suffering heat stress for days on end. It's not just a few hours here and there. It can be days on end where they've got high respiratory rates, open mouth panting, including overnight as well. There's limited diurnal variation. In other words, there's limited respite for the animals overnight because the sea temperatures and the ambient temperatures in the region are just they're just hot, they're stifling hot. And on board the vessel, of course, with the ammonia and the fecal buildup, that creates a really hot, wet, stuffy environment for them. So it's a very unpleasant experience for them. So we'll also be highlighting just the multitude of environmental stresses that the animals are subjected to, the long journey times, of course, and that's not just on sea, that's also the land transport component of live exports, both in Australia and then in the importing countries. The stocking densities, the ammonia buildup, as I mentioned, they suffer from a range of different ailments like inanition, which is an inability to adapt to new forms of feed, and then an inability to eat, and they can become weak and starve. Infection, respiratory diseases, a whole range of different issues that they're faced with. These are still issues that are coming up post the 2018 regulatory reforms. We'll also be making the point, because industry labours on this issue, they point to mortality rates, and that mortality rates are under 1%, and therefore animal welfare must be great if so few animals are dying on the vessels. So we're going to make the point that animal welfare is not a scientifically valid measure of, mortality rates are not a scientifically valid measure of animal welfare. It's an extremely blunt measure, and it only really tells us how many animals have died during the voyage. It doesn't really give us an insight into the experience of the animals that have survived the voyage. So relying on mortality rates just demonstrates that the industry has not learnt anything since the McCarthy review that took place in 2018 following the Oasi Express disaster. McCarthy's central recommendation was for the industry and indeed the Federal Department of Agriculture to move away from using mortality rates to measure the trade's performance, but they're struggling with that. They still go back to mortality rates because it's really the only thing they can hang their hat on. And then finally, of course, unstunt slaughter in the importing countries as well. That's obviously an incredibly bad animal welfare outcome. The sheep experience, the neck cut and the blood loss. So the fear, pain, distress associated with that is significant. And if processed here in Australia, even under halal accredited conditions, they would at least get the small mercy of stunning, where they're unconscious while that's happening. And finally, one of the other arguments the industry often makes is that if Australia exits the trade, then other nations are going to step in and they're going to have even worse standards than Australia, as though two wrongs make a right. Our response to that is that the question for Australia is, can we engage in this trade in a way that meets acceptable welfare standards? If that is not possible, which the evidence shows that it is not, and history shows that it's not, then Australia really has no business continuing to engage in the trade. And we can influence global standards of animal welfare through other more legitimate mechanisms like the World Organization for Animal Health, which sets international animal welfare standards, including in transport, and indeed through trade negotiations as well. We're negotiating agreements with Middle Eastern nations at the moment. The UAE Free Trade Agreement is about to be concluded, And that provides an avenue for Australia to really promote animal welfare, the improvement of animal welfare standards. So there's other more legitimate forums in which Australia can contribute to lifting international standards around animal welfare, rather than participating in a trade that's fundamentally incompatible with acceptable welfare standards. So they're I guess, the key top line points we will convey to the committee through our submission, and also through giving evidence at the inquiry in November as well. And they're some of the points that are fed into the submissions app. So really important for the New South Wales politicians to hear about all of that, because many, if not all of them, probably haven't been exposed to many of these issues in the past. We're also going to focus on community views as well, and just again convey to the New South Wales politicians how much Australians are opposed to the trade. And most of you all know this already, but the RSPCA does a lot of research, community polling on this issue over many years, sustained high levels of support for ending live sheep exports, 78% in the McCrindle research poll in 2022. They drilled down into Western Australia in particular, because as Peter mentioned, all of the trade goes out of Western Australia now. And even in Western Australia, 71% support the phase out. And then even in rural areas of WA, 69% support the phase out as well. So we'll often hear the industry and certain politicians from particularly the Nationals and Shooters and Fishers, who will try and play on this idea that there's a city-country divide on these issues, that it's naive city people imposing their views on country people. But the facts show that people in regional and rural areas of the country also don't support this trade, and they would like to see it phased out. So that idea of there being a significant difference between community views based on geography when it comes to animal welfare is simply not borne out by the data. And then finally, the independent panels report. So the federal government set up an independent panel to inquire into the impacts of the phase out of live sheep exports, and over 80% of the submissions they received supported the phase out. And likewise, the parliamentary committee at the federal level, it also received very high numbers of submissions, and over 85% of those supported the phase out as well. So it's pretty clear what the community's view is on the live sheep export trade. And finally, just going to the economic impacts now in New South Wales. So this is what, well, certainly some members of the committee will be most interested in. And there's if you've followed the debate at all, there's a big scare campaign going on at the moment where the industry is attempting to say that the sky's going to fall in if we don't export 500,000 head of sheep to the Middle East every year. And as we've said, all of those sheep come out that are sourced from WA. So you might be asking, well, what on earth is going to be the impact on New South Wales? And we can look at it in two sort of categories. What's the direct exposure of the New South Wales industry to live exports, and whether or not do New South Wales producers sell any sheep into the live export trade? And the answer to that is no, and they haven't for many, many years. Some sheep found their way down to Port Adelaide from New South Wales, where vessels used to go out from 2018 and prior. But after the Iwasi Express disaster, there has been no live export vessel depart from any port from the east coast of Australia and from South Australia since that period. So there's just no direct exposure to the trade and the phase out from New South Wales producers. They don't sell any sheep directly into the live sheep export trade. But what about indirect exposure? What about, is there any impact on prices of sheep from phasing out the live sheep export trade? Is there going to be more interstate trade? Is there going to be more WA sheep coming over to the east coast as a result of phasing out live sheep exports? I think the first point to note is that the live sheep export trade is a really, really small fraction of the overall sheep industry in Australia. It makes up less than 3% of the annual turnoff. That is the annual number of sheep that are leaving farms each year to either go to abattoirs or the live export trade. And it makes up less than 2% of the value of sheep meat exports out of Australia. So the value of sheep meat exports, so lamb and mutton exports, is around 4.5 billion in Australia. The value of the live sheep export trade is around 77 million. So we're talking about chalk and cheese here. It's a very, very small fraction of the overall sheep meat export industry. So in terms of the west to east coast interstate trade, that over the last sort of 14 or so years, it's very sporadic in nature, and only twice in that period have we seen any volumes that are material in nature to the point where they may have an impact on the supply-demand dynamics on the east coast. And that was in 2020, and the previous time that it exceeded 1 million head in interstate transfer was back in 2010. So it's sporadic, and generally it will be based on drought conditions on the east coast, where east coast producers will be restocking from sheep in WA if they're not experiencing the same dry conditions at the time. But yeah, you can see there that it's not a reliable trade. And even in the event, which wouldn't happen, but even in the event that every single one of the sheep going out on live on boats was instead trucked over to the east coast, you're still talking about a fairly small number, probably 500,000, and that would be diluted between 3 states: South Australia, Victoria, and New South Wales. They wouldn't all come to New South Wales, but that wouldn't happen in any event. Those animals instead would be going to local processing facilities in WA, and there's a lot of investment earmarked for expanding WA processing capacity as we speak. So there's likely to be little to no increase in interstate transfers as a result of the phase out. The independent panel also noted that just because of the additional costs and the logistics associated with trucking sheep over the Nullarbor, it just doesn't make commercial sense for them to be looking at that as an alternative market. And finally, in terms of the prices for sheep, the biggest determinant of sheep prices is international commodity prices for lamb and mutton, because we export 70% or so of the sheep meat that we produce in Australia. So it's the prices that they get internationally, which have the biggest influence on domestic sheep prices in Australia. Certainly not competition from the live export trade, which is, as I've mentioned, tiny in nature. But finally, we thought another really convincing point on this claim of impacts on New South Wales is that when you look at the independent panel's report, over 200 pages, they spent months touring WA and meeting with stakeholders all over the country. It doesn't mention any impacts on the New South Wales sheep industry. It barely mentions New South Wales at all. It mentions it about half a dozen times, and it's in relation to different things. It certainly doesn't mention any impacts on New South Wales. And that inquiry wasn't isolated to WA. It was looking at the impacts of the phase out more broadly. And it was very comprehensive in identifying all of the possible impacts of the phase out, and there wasn't anything noted in relation to the New South Wales sheep industry. So that's another key point to make in the submissions as well, which I think will be quite persuasive with the committee. So they're the 3 main categories we'll be focused on in the submission, and we've plugged those points into the submissions app as well. So you can select which ones you think are most convincing for your own submissions.
Thanks, Jed. Just a couple of points, and then Fraser's asked a couple of questions, which we might just talk through now before we go on to the next stage. I'll just point out that we'll make these slides available to everybody, so you can refer back to some of the more detailed points that Jed has just talked through. Once you've generated a submission, you can always add in more detailed points if you want to. just noting, actually, there are two things that the inquiry has open. It has a submission process. It also has a survey. And particularly if you're a New South Wales resident, once you've done a submission, you could also fill in the survey as well. It doesn't take too long if you've already got the information to put together in a submission. But Fraser's question, he's got two questions, but the first one is, as you've just been pointing out, Jed, New South Wales has no actual direct input into the live sheep trade. We don't see that there are any direct impacts. So should our submissions be pointing out that this is a waste of New South Wales government's time and taxpayers' money, I might point out, that is something that you could include in your submission, absolutely. In fact, when I go through the examples in a minute, you'll see that's actually one of my suggestions. And then the second question is, and I'll flip this to you, Jed, other than the formal submission, is there anything else that should be done in terms of approaching local New South Wales parliamentarians?
Yeah, look, I think it's always helpful to engage your local state member. I mean, to be honest, this is a bit of a political stunt, and I can't see it going anywhere. Having said that, we still need to be there to provide the evidence base so that the committee members can, I guess, have something to combat the misinformation and the fear-mongering that they will hear, no doubt, from some of the industry groups. So it's still really important that we're putting in submissions. But as far as meeting with local members go, I would always, if you've got the time and capacity to do that, because it will be helpful just to raise awareness with as many parliamentarians in New South Wales as possible. And the fact that they've got a current inquiry in relation to the matter, which will be tabled in the upper house, means that it's of relevance to them, even if they're in the lower house. It's still going to be of relevance to them. So yes, I would still recommend asking for meetings to chat about it.
Thanks, Jed. What is the committee backup? We might pause that question for next for the Q&A later, and let's move on now just to go through the submission writing process.
And just to just to let you know, I can't see the chats coming in. I don't know if other people can, but I think that might just be the chats are going to the host.
No, those are actually just direct messages to me, so that's probably why you can't see those ones. But yeah, you'll be able to see others.
Great. Okay.
So the next process, we're going to go through the submission co-pilot, and this process is very similar to ones that you've been through before, if you've been to one of these workshops before. But the idea is to create, to help use the AI tool to create a draft submission, which you then personalize. And I'll stress this a couple of times. The more you can personalize your submission, the better. So if there are particular points that have been made in the presentation so far that you really would like to include in your submission, then when you get access to the slides, I'd add those in. You can, this is your submission, and what the tool generates is very much your first draft. So we really encourage you to spend a bit of time working on it to make it reflect the way that you would normally write, add in any more details that you want to, just to make it, it's a starting point, it's a drafting process. The benefit of using the AI tool is it does generate a newly written submission each time, but yeah, we're really keen on you making that your personal submission. And then we'll just show you how you can upload that to the New South Wales Parliament website. It's pretty simple, this process. Sometimes, you have to log in, create a profile. That's not the case with this. It's a fairly straightforward process to lodge your submission. So yeah, I'll now switch over so that I can actually show you what the Copilot looks like. But if you want to do this at the same time, you can. The QR code there will take you to the Submission Copilot. The URL is there as well. And I'd just like to thank Casey Clifton, who is the technical support for all of this. He is the one that has developed the site for us, and offers his free advice and services to set it up every time. So we're really grateful to Casey. So I might now share my screen, Jed, if I can just do that. I'll take you to the Copilot. So yes, so this is the landing page. Once you get in here, you can obviously read through any of the information. You'll see it along the top. You've got the 5-6 different steps that we will take you through. So once you get in, you're going to want to select the project. There's only one current project at the moment, so that's fairly straightforward. The Read More tab will take you to the New South Wales Upper House inquiry page if you want to go and have a look at that. But otherwise, you just click on the project and it'll take you through to our information page. Just a little bit of information. We've already talked you through this, so it's about what the inquiry is about, and then explains what will happen next. I'll take you through to the next page. Okay, so what we're suggesting with this submission is it doesn't need to be very long. We're really talking about a 1-page, 1 to 2 page letter. We've suggested a number of different areas that you can make your argument about. So those include animal welfare concerns, making points about the cumulative stress and mortality during voyages, or the fact that mortality rates are not a valid measure of animal welfare. We've included arguments about the fact that sheep will be subjected to slaughter without stunning in importing countries. We've included arguments that there are other ways to improve animal welfare standards overseas, because that's an argument that the industry constantly makes, that this is the only way to do it. Then we've got some couple of arguments about community support, impact of animal cruelty on the community. This is something that came up during the independent panel. So it's really about the fact that repeated exposure to incidents of cruelty, watching these things on the news, knowing that it's happening, actually does have an effect on our well-being. This is not an animal welfare. The impact of these cruelty concerns on people needs to be something that is considered. So we've included that. We've also clearly stating that this isn't a New South Wales issue, it's a Western Australian issue, and there's no real evidence of any economic impact on New South Wales. So those are the different arguments you can select from. The points in each argument are largely similar. So what we suggest is you just pick one from each area, each section. So the way you do that is you just can go through the list, click on the paragraph that you select, the one that you prefer out of the 2 or 3 of them, go through doing that throughout the list. You don't have to pick all of them. You can pick all of them. But for example, if you don't really want to include an argument about the impact of animal cruelty on a community, you can leave that. So I'm going to leave that one. I'm going to pick everything else. And then I'm going to go to the next step. So this is where you can put in your name. That just means that it will refer to your name in the submission. You don't need to do that if you don't want to, particularly if you're concerned about putting personal details into an AI tool. No need for you to do that. Then you're going to describe a little bit about yourself. I'm just going to go to one I've prepared earlier. just a couple of sentences that will actually appear at the beginning of the submission, and then any additional arguments that you would like to make. So I'm adding for this one, for example, I'm unsure why this inquiry has been instigated when New South Wales farmers haven't been involved in the live sheep trade for many years, and there's much more important things that parliamentarians should be considering and taxpayers' money should be spent on. And then once you've done that, that's all the information it needs to generate the submission, except it's telling me I haven't done something, and I shouldn't have done that. Not sure why. Oh, anyway, let's not worry about that. Slight glitch there, because I've already prepared a submission. So this is what you would come to next. It would start to generate a submission. You know, it takes about 2 or 3 minutes sometimes for it to do that. But here's a submission that I prepared earlier with some different personal text. So when this comes through, you'll see that there will be a little bit of language that you're maybe not completely comfortable with. It's not exactly the way that you would write something. So I'd be looking through this to make sure, and as I said earlier, just spend 5 to 10 minutes just editing this text to make it fit the sort of submission that you would like to put in. And the best way to do that, you can copy the text directly, put it into a Word document if that's your preferred way of working, or you can create a Google document and work directly in that. So any of those ways are possible. Once you put it into your Word document, as I said, you can add more detail if you want to, based on any of the information that we've provided today, or we'll provide to you in the slide set later. And that is it in terms of the whole process. Once you're happy with the content of that, then at the bottom of this page, it will give you a link to the New South Wales Government website where you can lodge your submission. So I'll just show you how easy that is. So this has gone straight to the submission lodging link. So I'll just click on that, and all you need to put in are some contact details, and then go to the next page, and there will be some information just about how to upload your document. So it's pretty straightforward, that process. As I mentioned, there is also the ability to fill in a survey, and the link to the survey is also on the inquiry website. I'd like to thank you all for spending the last hour with us to do this. We're really grateful. It will make a difference. As Jed has really pointed out, it's about getting numbers of submissions in for this. And if we do that well, hopefully we won't be having another workshop like this in Victoria, because we will have foiled the industry's plan to create this as a way of putting their case forward. But yeah, thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.